Chapter 21, being enough. The brick wall that most people hit on their way to acceptance is a misconception that it will cause laziness and complacency. They think that self-acceptance means that you're believing that you are okay just as you are. Therefore, you will have no motivation for improvement, work, achievement, or change. In reality, the research shows us that those that have developed self-acceptance and learn to be self-compassionate are less likely to fear failure, more likely to persevere and try again. When they do fail, and generally have more self-confidence. Self-acceptance and the compassion we show ourselves when we are accepting of the self is not the same as becoming indifferent to the world and passively resigning yourself to accept defeat when things are tough. Having unconditional love for yourself means doing the opposite sometimes. It can mean taking the more difficult road because it is in your best interest. It is refusing to kick yourself while you are down, or indulging in self-loathing, and instead using every ounce of your strength to pull yourself back up after a fall. The difference is when you strive, you do so from a place of love and contentment, rather than striving from a place of fear and scarcity. If we don't do the work to develop self-acceptance, we set ourselves up for a life to live a life in which we may need constant reassurance, get trapped in jobs we hate, or relationships that cause us harm, or find ourselves living with resentment. So how do we develop self-acceptance? Alright, understanding yourself. It sounds simple, but many people go through life without much in the way of examining their own patterns of behavior that impact on their own experience of life. To build self-acceptance, we must first need to understand who we are and who we want to be. That comes from practicing self-awareness. We become self-aware through self-reflection. Keeping journals, going to therapists, or talking to friends can all help us to reflect on ourselves and our experience in a way that enables us to learn more about who we are and why we do what we do. Self-acceptance involves listening to our own needs and meeting them. If we are not paying attention, we don't always pick up on the signs. During that process, it is important to be attentive to the parts of us that we feel proud of, and the parts of us that we may prefer not to think about, the things we dislike, feeling anxious or regretful about what we want to change. But when we do reflect on those more difficult aspects of ourselves, it is crucial that we come at it with the compassion of an observer if we are to learn. If reflecting on difficult situations triggers intense emotions that make it hard to think clearly, it can be helpful to get support from a therapist to help us work through it. Painting the picture of self-acceptance. Let's say that from the moment you close this book, you're starting to live your life with unconditional self-acceptance. What would it look like? What would you do differently? What would you say yes to? What would you say no to? What would you work harder on? What would you let go of? How would you speak to yourself? How would you speak to others? Try writing down your answers to those questions in great detail and create a vision of how the idea of self-acceptance would translate into behavior change for you. As with most changes, the action comes first and the feelings come later. So living a life in which you feel a sense of self-worth means making it a life practice. The hard work is never done. You never arrive. You do the work every day to live in line with unconditional self-acceptance. Accepting all of you. While you maintain a sense of self that stays with you throughout your life, you also experience a wide range of emotional states that are constantly in motion, changing from one moment to the next. We take on different roles and behaviors in different scenarios, and many people see those as different parts of themselves. Depending on our early life experiences and how the world responded to these emotional states, we can feel that some of those parts of the self are less acceptable than others. If anger was unacceptable for you growing up, then you might feel it much harder to treat yourself with compassion and acceptance when you are feeling angry. This makes self-acceptance conditional on how you feel. So try this. You can build your awareness of how you respond to various emotions and practice stepping back from them and responding to them with compassion using the following exercise that is used in the compassion focused therapy. Spend a few moments thinking back to a recent event that triggered a mix of emotions. Is it a good idea to start with something that is not too distressing so that you don't become overwhelmed while trying to practice the exercise? Number 1, write down a few thoughts about the event. Number 2, write down the different emotions it brought up. For example, anger, sadness, or anxiety. Number 3, for each emotion that you have identified, take one at a time, connecting with that feeling and exploring your answers to the following questions. Number 1, where do you notice that feeling in your body? How did you know that feeling was there? Number 2, which of your thoughts were linked to that feeling? If that emotion could speak, what would it say? Number 3, what urges came along with that feeling? If that emotion had been able to decide the outcome, what would it have made you do? For example, anxiety may have wanted you to run away, and anger may have wanted you to shout at someone. Number 4, what does that part of you need? What would help that emotion to help you calm back down? Once you have done this for each emotion that was present, end by answering the question for your compassionate self. That part of you that wants to show yourself unconditional love and acceptance. As you do this for each emotion, give yourself time to step back from connecting with an emotion before stepping into the next one, if there were lots of mixed emotions. Each time you do this, you're strengthening the ability to diffuse those emotions, get a good understanding of them without getting overwhelmed by them. This can be a helpful exercise for examining those mixed emotions, allowing us to see that even those emotions that were once saw as unacceptable are just normal. Each reflects a different way of interpreting the situation, so that we can come to different conclusions about which direction to take next. Taking time to get a bird's eye view of the emotional experiences like this can help us to engage with our compassion, even in situations where we have been taught to be harsh on ourselves. Kicking self-criticism. What does this self-criticism sound like? What words do you use? What does it focus on? What types of things do you criticize yourself for? Appearance, performance, personality traits, comparison? Certain forms of self-criticism can be more damaging than others. Sometimes self-criticism can take the form of telling yourself that you are inadequate after a failure. But when it goes further than that, and you feel a sense of disgust and hate towards yourself, it's more pervasive and shaming. So try this. This is a quick exercise that can help us get some distance from our inner critic and to see it for what it is. Once you have reflected on all the different ways you can criticize yourself, take a moment to imagine that critic as a person outside of your own head. What would they look like? What would their facial expression and tone of voice be as they spoke to you? What emotions would they be expressing? How does it feel to have them in front of you? What do you think might be their intention? Is it a misguided attempt to protect you in some way? Is this someone you would want to spend time with? Is it someone who would help you to live a happy life? And finally, ask yourself, what is the impact of spending each hour of the day with this critic? Finding your compassionate side. When your inner critic has been a close but unwanted comparison of your life, it is impossible to simply decide to remove them. That well-practiced action means the neural pathways are easily accessible for your brain, so that voice will speak up from time to time. What we need to do is provide ourselves with a new, healthier, and more helpful voice, and then start practicing. In the same way, you made time to see and hear the inner critic. Let's invite the compassionate side of you to the party. The side that wants the best for you and recognizes the harm that the self-attack causes. That part of you that still wants you to grow and achieve, but from a place of love rather than shame. Take some time to consider what compassionate self-talk might sound like. Remember, this is not the same as positive thinking. Someone who has compassion is honest and kind, encouraging and supportive, and wants the best for you. What words would you use when showing compassion to others? What words of compassion have expressed to you? Bring to mind a memory of a time when someone showed you compassion. How did they look at you? What did they say? How did that make you feel? What would it be like to have access to that voice at any time? So try this. To strengthen our compassionate side, we simply have to put in some reps on a regular basis and practice. Try writing a compassionate letter to yourself. Allow yourself to write spontaneously in the way you might write to a close friend who was suffering or trying their best to change. How would you express to them that you had their back always and wished for their suffering to ease? Nobody needs to read the letter, but the process of engaging with your compassionate self and thinking through the various ways that you can express that helps you to build the mental muscle to use it when you need it most. If you find yourself struggling to access that feeling of compassion for yourself, focus on someone you love unconditionally and imagine you are writing to them, or use the words that loved ones have used to you in the past. Chapter summary. There's a misconception that self-acceptance will cause laziness, complacency, and lack of drive. In reality, the research shows us that those who develop self-acceptance and learn to be self-compassionate are less likely to fear failure and more likely to try again when they do fail. Self-acceptance is not the same as passively accepting defeat. Self-compassion often involves taking the more difficult road that is in your best interest. On fear. Chapter 22. Make anxiety disappear. For as long as I can remember, I have had a fear of heights. For the most part, I was able to avoid them growing up. But when I met my now husband, we went on a trip to Italy together. When we were visiting the Leaning Tower of Pisa, and as we stood looking at it, we held out 2 tickets. We were going to the top. A deep intake of breath was followed by a glance up at the tower that leans at 3.99 degrees and looking worriedly close to falling over. My heart started to beat against my ribcage and I felt sick. But those tickets were bought, so we went up. To get up to the top of the Leaning Tower of Pisa, you climb the narrow stone steps that spiral around the tower. The ground beneath your feet is not level. As you scale the tower, you get a sensation that it's starting to fall over. At least that was my assessment at the time. With a queue of people behind me, I kept going. Once at the top, the tilt felt even worse. Everyone walked straight over to the edge to take in the view. I had the overwhelming urge to get closer to the ground. I moved as far away from the edge as I could get and dropped to the ground. There was a vague attempt to make it look like I was just sitting down casually to rest. But by now, my fear of embarrassment was outweighed by my fear of falling to death. Of course, sitting on the floor made me no safer. But it was not based on logic. My brain was sending out strong signals to the rest of my body to get down. I even found myself looking down at the slab of stone to avoid looking at the view. Matthew took a picture of me crouching on the floor, and we have a funny memory to look back on. But what was going on at the time? Why did I have the urge to get on the floor? My phobia, learned early in childhood, meant that the moment I saw those tickets and imagined climbing to the top of the tower, my body reacted. My heart started beating faster. My breath became shallow and fast. My palms sweaty. The building being off balance only contributed to my predictions that would fall to my death at any moment. But the brain's alarm system, which was sounding and telling me to get to safety, is more like a smoke alarm. It doesn't have time taking into account all of the facts. Its job is to sense danger and to let me know. It takes its information from the distress signals in my body and information about my surroundings from my senses and pieces that together with memories of what was happening when I last felt this way. In the same way that a smoke alarm can go off when there is a fire, it can also go off when something is making the toast. The strong urge to drop to the ground was a suggestion from my brain that my body took very seriously, much to the amusement of everyone else on the tower. The fear was overwhelming, so I did the first thing that I could think to feel safer. I wanted the fear to go away. The strong urges to get to safety are not a fault, but the brain working at its best to keep us safe. Crucially, my actions did not make me any safer, but just helped me to feel safer. The question of how to make my anxiety go away might be one of the most common questions I receive. It makes sense to ask that. Anxiety is uncomfortable at best, overwhelming at worst. When you feel anxious, your body is working really hard, so that is also exhausting. Nobody wants to live with anxiety every day. Here's where I went wrong with the Leaning Tower of Pisa, and did very little to help my fear of heights. I avoided the fear as much as I could. I got close to the ground. I avoided looking out at the view. I even shut my eyes when I could. I tried to convince myself that I was not up high. I left the tower before my fear had left me. As my feet hit the comforting grass of the field of dreams once again, I felt a rush of relief and my body immediately calmed. My brain said, "Phew, that was dangerous. Let's not ever do that again." I did everything I could to make the fear go away as soon as possible. But all the things that give us instant relief tend to keep us stuck in the long term. If I knew then what I know now, and I was on that trip to tackle my fear of heights, here's what I should have done. I would have gone to the top of the tower and looked out over the view. The feeling would have all been the same, but this time I would allow it to be present without trying to avoid it. I would have responded to them by taking control of my breathing, and I would have focused on my breathing slowly. I would have reminded myself that my body and my brain were responding in this way because I have a memory of being up high and feeling unsafe as a child. I would have reminded myself repeatedly that I was, in fact, safe. I would have turned my attention to why I was there, and I would have continued to breathe slowly for however long it took for my body to exhaust itself. When my fear started to subside and my body had calmed, only then would I step down again. I would then repeat the pattern for as many days as possible, knowing that over time my body would habituate to this situation, and my fear response would gradually reduce in its intensity. Fear is a part of our survival response. It is supposed to be intensely uncomfortable, and the urges to escape and then avoid the fear or situation are supposed to be strong. If we were in a survival situation, that system works incredibly well to keep us safe. That moment you are crossing the road and you hear a car horn too close. Before you can even think about the situation, you dash to the curb quicker than you would ever thought you could move. Then you feel the surge of adrenaline wash over your body. That is a fear response working at its best. But a system that works that fast does not have time to contemplate what signs are valid and which ones might be less reliable senses of danger. It senses, it acts. You survive? Thank you, brain. In other situations, when your life is not in danger, the urges are still the same. You're asked to speak in a meeting and your heart starts pounding. Your heart may be getting out of your body ready to be alert and to perform. But if you interpret that as fear and make your excuses to leave the room, then avoid those meetings in the future. You never get to experience talking in the meetings and having it go well. The things that give us immediate relief from our fear tend to feed that fear in the long term. Every time we say no to something because of fear, we reconfirm our beliefs that it wasn't safe or that we couldn't handle it. Every time we cut something out of our lives because of fear, life shrinks a little. So our efforts to get rid of fear today may mean that fear gets to take over our life choices in the long term. Our attempts to control and to eliminate it become the real problem that dictates our every move. Fear is around every corner, in every novel situation we face, in every creative endeavor, and in every learning experience. If we are unwilling to experience it, what are we left with? Chapter summary. It is understandable to want anxiety to disappear. It is supposed to be uncomfortable. To fight fear, you must first be willing to face it. Escape and avoidance only provides short-term relief, but feeds anxiety in the long term. Our attempts to control fear and eliminate it become the real problem that dictates our every move. A threat response needs to work fast, so it tends to sound the alarm before you have a chance to think about things in more detail. Chapter 23, Things that we do that makes anxiety worse. When we feel anxious about something, the most natural human response is to avoid it. We know that if we stay away, we feel safe, for now. But avoidance not only maintains anxiety, it makes it worse over time. Your brain learns like a scientist. Each time it has an experience, positive or negative, it clocks that as evidence for its beliefs. If you avoid the thing that you fear, you never give yourself the chance to build up the evidence in your mind that you can get through it and survive. Telling your brain that something is not safe enough, you must experience it. Your brain will take some convincing. So you need to repeat that behavior over and over, as many times as it takes. The things that you do the most of the time because of your comfort zone. So if you want to feel less anxious about something, do it as often as you can. Use the skills to help you to sit with the anxiety, and it will reduce over time. When we learn to face things that make us feel afraid, we get stronger. When we do that day after day, over time we develop a sense of growth. Imagine if, over the next 5 years, you made your decisions based on your life that you wanted to have, instead of fear. We avoid the discomfort of fear in so many ways. If you feel anxious about a social event, you may avoid it by not going. Or maybe you do go, but you drink to excess before you go. Drinking may dampen that anxiety in the moment, leaving you feeling the need to do the same at the next social event. These safety behaviors work in the same way to numb the anxiety in the moment, but they do not help us to feel less afraid in the future. In fact, they do the opposite. They feed the anxiety for the future, and we become dependent on those safety behaviors, making life even harder. Here's a list of some of the most common safety behaviors that ease anxiety in the moment, but keep us stuck in the long term. Escape. Whether it be in social situations, a supermarket, or confined space, when anxiety hits, we have the urge to get out of there as quickly as possible. Anxious avoidance. The moment you say no to the invitation to that social situation or opt for food delivery to avoid the anxious feeling you get in the supermarket, you're rewarded with instant relief. I don't have to face that feeling today. But the longer you stay away from something, the more the fear seems to grow. Then the day comes that you need to face it once again, and it now feels overwhelming. Compensatory strategies. This can help after experiencing a high anxiety state. For example, someone with a fear of contamination or sickness may wash excessively after being in a hospital setting. Anticipation, also called sensitization. This is when we rehearse and anticipate various worst case scenarios that may occur in a feared situation. We are often convinced that it is helping because it will protect us if we are prepared. But it can lead to hypervigilance and excessive worry without constructive planning, which leads to increased anxiety. All right, so reassurance seeking. In the moments of anxiety and doubt, we may ask for reassurance from a loved one that everything will be okay. It is hard to see a loved one in distress, so they are often more than willing to use reassurance to help calm the anxiety. But over time, that instant relief can become addictive, and we develop a dependency on that other person. We may need almost constant reassurance or feel unable to leave the house without being accompanied by the person who makes us feel safe, which can weigh heavily on the relationship. Safety behaviors. We can also come to rely on things that we associate with safety if we do not trust ourselves to be able to cope with anxiety hits. We may feel unable to go anywhere without just in case medications, or we take a mobile phone everywhere because looking down at it enables us to avoid conversation at social events. Now we're just addicted to our phones. Chapter summary. When we feel anxious about something, the most natural human response is to avoid it. But avoidance maintains anxiety. Just telling your brain that something is safe is not enough. You must experience it to truly believe it. Your brain will take some convincing, so you need to repeat that behavior over and over. The things you do most often become your comfort zone. If you want to feel less anxious about something, do it as often as you can. Alright, so chapter 24, how to calm anxiety right now. If you struggle with anxiety, you are probably hoping for a tip that you can use right now. Something easy to learn that will have instant effects. Many people feel this way at the beginning of therapy. That is why I teach people this first skill as early as possible. It is easy to learn and it takes just a few minutes to bring down the intensity of anxiety. At the very least, it prevents anxiety from escalating into panic. When anxiety is triggered, you start breathing more quickly. This is your body's way of getting extra oxygen to fuel the survival response. You feel as though you cannot catch your breath, so you start breathing faster with rapid, shallow breaths. Then, you have an excess of oxygen in your system. If you slow your breathing down, you can calm the body and in turn, slow your breathing. Not only this, but if you extend the out breath so that it is longer and more vigorous than the in breath, this helps to slow your heart rate down. When the pounding heart comes down, so does the anxiety response. Some people like to count their breaths when doing an extended out breath, such as breathing in for a count of 7 and then out for a count of 11. Or a variation that works for you. Taking some time to practice slow breathing techniques is a great investment of time. It is an anxiety management tool that works in the moment. You can do it anywhere, anytime, and nobody even needs to know that you're doing it. One of my favorites is square breathing. Just follow the steps below. Toolkit, square breathing. Step 1, focus your gaze on something square. A nearby window, door, picture frame, or computer screen. Number 2, focus your eyes on the bottom left-hand corner as you breathe in. Count to 4. Trace your eyes up to the top of the corner. Step 3, hold your breath for 4 seconds as you trace across the top of the corner. Step 4, as you breathe out, trace down to the bottom corner. counting to 4 once again. And then step 5, hold for 4 seconds as you move back to the bottom left corner. There's your square. So you breathe in for 4 seconds, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4. Focusing on something square can act as a guide to help keep your attention on the breathing, minimizing the chances of being distracted too soon. If you try for a few minutes and feel like it's not working yet, keep going. It takes some time for your body to respond. One extra tip is practicing this every day, at times when you don't feel anxious. When something is well practiced, it is easier to use when you find yourself overwhelmed with fear. Movement. Movement, another tool that has almost instant effects and requires very little practice to master, is exercise. When your anxiety response is triggered, your muscles are filled up with oxygen and adrenaline, ready to move fast. If you don't want to move and burn off that fuel, your body is like a rocket with engines firing and nowhere to go, bringing on the trembling, shaking, sweating, and the urge to pace around the house. Exercise is probably one of the best anxiety management tools because it allows the natural course of your threat response. Your body is geared up to move. Allow it to do that, and your body can use up the energy and the stress hormones it has produced and rebalance. If you have a stressful day, try adding in a short jog outside or an intense half hour with a punching bag. Physical movement will truly relieve your body of the physical stress so that when you sit down to relax, you feel calm and fall asleep more easily, helping you to replenish further. My extra tip here is that exercise is a powerful prevention tool. So try to exercise even on the days when you don't feel anxious. This way you are setting yourself up to have a better day tomorrow. Your mental health will thank you for it. Chapter summary. When anxious, our breathing becomes faster and each breath is more shallow. To calm the body, take deeper, slower breaths. Try to make the out breath longer and more vigorous than the in breath. Give it some time and the anxiety response will begin to drop.